the soldier who beat 3 enemies to death with his bare hands. To his workmates, he was, apart from his enormous size, an ordinary guy who smoked cigars in the hallways and read books during his breaks. But to his comrades in the military, he was the legend who had crushed the skulls of 2 Chinese soldiers by smashing them together with his bare hands. This is the tale of David Bleak, one of the most badass Medal of Honor recipients to ever live. Born on February 27, 1932, David Bleak was a Mormon from rural Idaho. Measuring 6 foot 5 inches tall and weighing in at 250 pounds, he was a beast of a man who became a rancher after dropping out of high school. However, he wasn't content with being a farmer forever. He knew there was a whole other world out there away from Idaho, and he was desperate to see it. And so on November 1st, 1950, he joined the U.S. Army, after which he was sent to Fort Riley in Kansas for basic training. There he was, placed in a medical unit attached to the 223rd Infantry Regiment, which was part of the 40th Infantry Division. When the Korean War broke out in 1950, his division was called up to serve. After receiving another round of intensive medical training, he was deployed to the Korean Peninsula in January of 1952. Following a promotion to sergeant, his platoon was given the task of defending a mountainous region based around Minari-go. This was situated right near the 38th parallel, the current border that separates North and South Korea. By 1952, the Korean War had transformed from a dynamic, expansive conflict into a gritty stalemate characterized by constant low-intensity fighting. Much like the trench warfare of World War I, both sides now bitterly fought over tiny slivers of territory. It was with this backdrop that at 4:30 a.m. on June 14, 1952, David Bleak set out on a mission as part of a 20-man reconnaissance force. Their objective was to scout out the positions of the Chinese who were allied with the North Koreans in order to find out if they were planning an imminent attack. The terrain they were to investigate, a mixture of low bushes and small dips in the land, would leave them extremely exposed. As a result, about 2 hours earlier, another American company had launched an offensive to their left to draw attention away from Bleak's patrol. The thing is, though, it didn't work. As the group were cresting a hill, they were suddenly met with automatic heavy weapons fire. Bleak, who was located at the back of the line, immediately rushed towards his comrades who had gone down. After applying field dressings and making sure they were stabilized, he followed the rest of the group to the top of the hill. Suddenly, he saw another American soldier collapse. It was at this moment that David Bleak went beyond the call of duty when he dove into the enemy trench, targeting his buddies. Tackling an onrushing Chinese soldier, he proceeded to snap his neck with his monstrously big hands while they struggled on the ground. Getting up to his feet, he hardly had time to compose himself when he saw another person charge towards him. Instinctively, he grabbed him by the neck. He pushed down so hard that the man's windpipe was crushed like an apple being pressed. As Bleak's second victim fell limp to the floor, a third enemy rushed towards him, determined to slay the giant who just brutally killed his friends. Whipping out his combat knife, he dealt with the oncoming threat by stabbing him through the chest. Having broken 3 fully grown adults like they were toys, Bleak got back to the task at hand and gave medical attention to the other American casualties. Then, as he took a breath, a Chinese grenade suddenly bounced off a squad mate's helmet. In a split second, he shoved his colleague away, throwing his own enormous body over him as a human shield. By some sort of miracle, both emerged unscathed. A little shaken up from the explosion, Bleak nevertheless continued to tend to the wounded as his platoon retreated back down the hill. In the process, not 1, not 2, but 3 more Americans were hit by a concealed Chinese machine gun. Having already performed multiple acts of the highest valor that would each individually make him eligible for the Medal of Honor, Bleak went even further, ignoring the bullets zipping past him to tend to the wounded. As he did so, he was shot in the leg. After applying bandages to himself and 2 of his downed comrades, went to the third, who was so beat up that he couldn't move. Lifting him on his shoulders, the burly Idahoan trudged through a cloud of gunfire to carry him to safety. But he wasn't done just yet. Seeing two bayonet-wielding Chinese soldiers charge out of nowhere, he laid the injured American down to meet them. In a display of extraordinary agility for a man of his size, he dodged their thrusts, and grabbing both of their heads, he bashed them together so hard they died instantaneously. Tossing the small corpses away, the gentle giant picked his patient back up and continued onwards. In the end, all 20 of the troops on patrol made it back alive, and they were even able to bring back some prisoners of war. In total, a third of them had been injured, but mainly because of Bleak's heroic actions, they'd all survived to tell the tale. Against all the odds, the man who saved them had also come through with only a bit of nerve damage to his leg to show for it. Shortly after the events of June 14th, David Bleak's tour of duty came to an end. However, he wasn't ready to go home just yet. He volunteered to stay on in Asia, ending up in a posting in Japan. It was here that he learned he'd been recommended for the Medal of Honor. On October 27, 1953, he was presented with the U.S. Army's highest decoration for courage by President Dwight Eisenhower at a ceremony held at the White House. While bestowing the medal on him, the president is reported to have said, "You've got a big neck." As humble as he was brave, when he returned to Idaho, he refused to use his newfound fame to land better jobs. Instead, he entered the workforce from the bottom just like everyone else. After a brief stint as a truck driver, he became a meat cutter for a grocery store. There, he met the love of his life and mother of his 4 children, Lois. The couple settled in Shelley, Idaho, where he started working as a janitor at the Idaho National Engineering Laboratory. According to his colleagues, family, and friends, David Bleak was a quiet, unassuming man who hardly, if ever at all, talked about his superhuman achievement. This was because, according to his wife, quote, he couldn't understand why everybody wanted to make such a fuss over him. He was just doing what everybody else was. The difference was he was twice as strong, end quote. Still, although largely content with living a normal life, glimpses of his privileged status would occasionally shine through. One coworker recalls how one time Bleak was invited to a special recognition ceremony at the White House, but wasn't permitted to go by his boss because he was in the middle of a project. A little later, the upper management at the lab was informed by the White House itself that David Bleak would have time off to go, whether they liked it or not. Just like he had done in the Army, through hard work, grit, and determination, he climbed his way up the career ladder through his own effort alone. When he retired in the mid-1990s, he had become the laboratory's chief hot cell technician, person in charge of disposing radioactive fuel rods. On March 23, 2006, David Bleak died, leaving behind 4 children, 9 grandchildren, and 6 great-grandchildren. Because of his reputation, he was entitled to a burial with full military honors at Arlington National Cemetery. But pomp and braggadocio were never his style. Instead, he chose to be cremated and for his ashes to be spread across his beloved Idaho.